Hi, I'm Becky Hague. You've been listening to the newest addition to Trinity Presbyterian Church here in Venice, Florida. Welcome. And we have here Jennifer Harris. And Jennifer, I know your educational background has been very varied. What can you tell us about what you've done and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I grew up in church and playing music in church, but I didn't want to do church or music as a career because I wanted to make a living. So I actually started out, I thought I would be a doctor, and my first year of anatomy and physiology, there was an unfortunate fainting spell, so that kind of put a kibosh on that, so I switched to pre-law. That was about 3 years, and then had some really cool encounters with people that are a much longer story than we have time for now that shifted my focus from pre-law to music. And so I ended up switching everything over, started over as a freshman in music, and got an undergraduate and master's degree in voice performance from the University of Michigan. Did a lot of professional singing, just always singing in churches at the same time. And along the way, as professional opportunities became more of a challenge, particularly back in 2008, 2009, when the real estate market shifted, funding for the arts dried up. And so I was offered an opportunity here in Venice at Venice Presbyterian Church with Pastor Chris Romig, and he and I started a new contemplative worship service over there. And then that grew into the trajectory for the next several years of my life, which was full-time church music. Along that way, just became hungry to know more about the bigger picture of worship, not just music, learning that music and worship are not synonyms. They don't mean the same thing. And it was here in Venice that I went to a Presbyterian meeting, and they had brought in a professor from Wheaton College who started lecturing on that. And through her, Dr. Constance Cherry is her name, I got connected to the Institute for Worship Studies, where I did my doctorate in worship theology, which was a really wonderful supplement to my music training. So we studied the biblical and theological, the practical, the missional applications of worship in the bigger picture, over denominational differences and for the global church, capital C. And as that has kind of been my path for the past few years, my desire to serve in the church has grown. Not that I want to leave music behind, but to what I'm calling add more tools to my toolbox. And so just last week, in fact, I started my first quarter online at Fuller Seminary in Master of Divinity program, looking ahead to the possibility of ordination in the Presbyterian Church.
Awesome. Well, I know your most recent work, before you went back to school, has been as a worship leader. A lot of people don't quite understand the difference between a worship leader and a pastor. Could you tell me a little bit about that and your experiences in that?
I was fortunate in the church that I grew up in, which was actually a very contemporary model, to have been shown what a good worship leader looked like. And that is a person who encourages the congregation's participation. I see a lot of contemporary worship that has shifted from that, where the worship leader is a soloist or a professional and the music behind them on the platform is a performance. In my opinion, if the congregation is not able to participate with what the worship leader is doing, and I will caveat that to say that a worship leader by definition doesn't just do music. A worship leader leads all actions of worship. If the congregation is left behind in any of that, then the worship leader has failed in their job. Throughout the service, even with people who have been coming to church a long time and with working with people that they've had up front for a long time, there are always moments to teach. And that is the role of the worship leader, is to sort of bridge the gap between the congregational's comfort level and God's presence, and to build a bridge, to make the way clear, to encourage and exhort and lead the way into the presence of God.
To engage people.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges I have with contemporary worship these days is people are not engaged. They are entertained. They enjoy a good product, but have they used their voices? Have they used their hands? Have they used their body in some way to participate, to engage? And with the formational and transformational nature of worship, if you are not participating, those benefits just kind of go right on past you.
Helps make it memorable.
Absolutely, absolutely. The more that we can engage not only our singing voices, our bodies, our brains, our senses, all of that helps land it better into the brain, into the memory center. The more things that are connected to it help us remember it. Yeah.
Well, you've had the fortune of being able to be affiliated with a wide variety, really, of denominations. Tell me a little bit about that and how that's made a difference and helped you.
That's a great question. As I mentioned, I grew up in a very contemporary style worship, and I thought all church services were 2.5 or 3 hours long. When I was in college for music, I had the opportunity to start cantoring for the Diocese of Detroit, actually at the cathedral in downtown Detroit, which was a culture shock, to say the least, to go from such lack of liturgical actions to the height of liturgical actions, particularly because the archbishop was in residence there. So there was incense every week. There was all the major actions of worship every Sunday. And it really blew the lid off of my mind as to what was possible in worship, and just really started to fall in love with the rhythm, with the container that the liturgy provides, that the contemporary model could grow into a little bit more. So I have served the most contemporary to the most traditional or liturgical. I argue contemporary is liturgical, it's just less. I have served Presbyterian churches and Methodist churches, and all of that to say I am a denominational mutt, probably, but we all bring something to the table. So, the freedom of the spirit from the contemporary model to the high awe and reverence of the super traditional model, and the joy of singing from the Methodists, and the beautiful commitment to doctrine from the Presbyterians, all of those things just serve to function together well. I believe that it has been said we all bring something to the table, and if we could start to embrace that as a collective church, again, capital C, and focus on those things rather than our differences, I think the world could shift significantly in its connection to God.
And I think it's really needed at this time in our country and in our lives. So, well, I appreciate you sitting down with me and sharing a little bit about yourself. I look forward to a couple of other opportunities to do so we can help the rest of our congregation, both here and virtually, know a little bit more about you and feel like they know you. So thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer Harris. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Becky.